I don't have any specific information about the particular report and the allegations made within that report. But what I will say is that the U.S. government has been well aware of concerns to the supply chain. It's something that we've seen in terms of software being downloaded that contains malicious code, and the concern about hardware being implanted with certain chips that a particular nation state, China and others, may have access to that would provide them the ability to collect intelligence, to potentially manipulate data, et cetera. So the supply chain has been a major concern for at least a decade that I'm aware of.
So Apple and Amazon are both denying the specifics of this story, but what you're talking about is a much broader problem, just the idea that the government knows about this and has for a decade. Is that an argument for making computer hardware onshore instead of offshore?
Well, it's something they've certainly had concerns about. We've seen in the past electronic equipment coming out of China that the government has put out directives that they will not use in government infrastructure. Huawei, the Chinese manufacturer of routers, as an example, is one of those areas. There have been other mobile devices coming out of China. So certainly that concern has been expressed behind closed doors, but outside of that, they've made specific actions and directives to prevent that type of equipment from getting into the environments.
What you're talking about, these public statements that we've heard in the past, that was always concerning Chinese companies, not U.S. companies that happen to be using manufacturing facilities overseas. You're saying, though, that for over a decade, the U.S. has known that any American company using overseas manufacturing was potentially at risk for this, too?
Well, the U.S. government has been concerned about the supply chain writ large, and that covers the whole.
Just because these are pretty outrageous claims. You're saying the U.S. government has been concerned, or they knew about particular instances where this had happened?
I'm saying there have been discussions about the need for the supply chain and the integrity of the supply chain to be checked. This is not something that was secret. It's been publicized. The U.S. government put out a comprehensive national cybersecurity initiative back in 2008, and in that initiative, one of the tenets of that, one of the major initiatives, was the integrity of the supply chain. Mm-hmm. So this is something that certainly the government was aware of, the fragility and the potential vulnerabilities of the supply chain. We've seen that play out with software attacks, where companies have downloaded software that's been Trojanized, it's got malware in it, and provided access to a particular adversary group. The concern about hardware is this similar type of concern because of the range of access an adversary might have if they had access to manipulation of the hardware.
It makes an awful lot of sense. I just want to clarify one more time for anybody who is kind of tuning in, just waking up and hearing this. The government has had concerns. It makes a lot of sense to have those concerns, but you're not aware of any instances where it was actually taking place and where U.S. manufacturing operations had been compromised?
I'm not aware of that at all. But what I would say, though, is as we look forward, one of the concerns from my perspective is how these types of things are interdicted or identified. The concern is that networks are all interconnected. That's the reason that they work. And the type of data that is put in into the networks, the way the networks are used to run our day-to-day lives, it's certainly fragile and susceptible to an attack. I think that we've got to define what the norms are, government to government, what's acceptable and what's not, and how do we make those types of treaties or those types of agreements to ensure that the networks remain safe. People can go about their day-to-day lives without concern that networks are going to be disrupted.